Imagine saving the world's greatest empire from total annihilation, achieving the impossible by crushing a superpower's army with nothing but dirt and a shovel, only to be stabbed in the back by the very person you served so faithfully. Think you know Roman history? Forget it. What you are about to hear isn't like a history textbook. It's a bloody thriller where genius on the battlefield crashes against black envy in golden palaces. In this story, we will tell you how a 20-year-old young man stopped a 50,000-strong horde of immortal killers using tactics that made old generals' hair stand on end. You will learn why the emperor feared his savior more than his enemies, and what role a woman who rose to the throne from the very bottom of a street circus played in the hero's fall. But the most terrifying part awaits you at the end. You will see a glorious defender of the people transform into a ruthless executioner, and you will learn the chilling truth about the price of power. The lives of 30,000 innocent people locked in a stone trap. Watch until the end to see the moment when the great Rome finally lost its soul. Do you smell that? Breathe in through your nose, deeply. That isn't frankincense or expensive myrrh, which they love to burn on the golden altars in Constantinople. That is the smell of fear. Dense, sticky, a metallic taste on your lips. The year is 527 AD, and what remains of the once great Roman Empire resembles an old, sick lion. Its fur has fallen out, its fangs are worn down, and jackals are already gathering around, sensing easy prey. You think Rome is eternal? Look around. The West has already fallen, dragged away by barbarians for souvenirs, and the East is hanging by a thread, held together by bureaucracy and inertia. But inertia ends when a steel avalanche appears on the horizon. Sassanid Persia. We aren't talking about scattered tribes of barbarians in animal skins. This is a superpower, ancient, wealthy, arrogant. Their king of kings looks at the Romans not as rivals, but as a mistake that needs correcting. Persian cataphracts, iron-clad horsemen, are the tanks of antiquity. They know the Roman army has rotted from the inside. Corruption has eaten away the legions worse than rust. The generals are pampered courtiers who fight only for seats at banquets, and quartermasters steal everything from grain to bowstrings. The border is bursting at the seams. Any sane person at this moment would pack their bags and run far away from the eastern frontiers. But history is rarely written by sane people. Let's transport ourselves to the stifling corridors of the Great Palace in Constantinople. Here, amidst marble and silk, sits a man who refuses to acknowledge reality. Justinian, the new emperor, an armchair ruler, a provincial who made it big thanks to his uncle and diabolical cunning. He has no military experience, but he has ambitions the size of the sky. He sleeps 4 hours a night and dreams of restoring Rome to its former greatness, retaking Africa, retaking Italy, making the Mediterranean Sea a Roman lake again. Sounds like the ravings of a madman, right? How can an empire that cannot protect its own borders from the Persians dream of conquest? Justinian needs a sword. Not just a general who knows how to march in parades. He needs a killer, a genius, a man who can do the impossible with minimal resources. And he makes a bet that leaves the entire court frozen in shock. He appoints Flavius Belisarius as commander-in-chief of the Eastern Army. Who? Do you hear that whispering in the Senate? The snickers of the veterans. He is only 25 years old. 25. By the standards of the Roman gerontocracy, he is an infant. Yesterday's bodyguard. A boy who hasn't even learned how to wear a toga properly is now supposed to stop a 50,000-strong horde of Persians? It's not just a risk. It's suicide. But Justinian is paranoid, and that is his strength. He fears the old generals with their connections and influence. He needs his own man, a man from nowhere. Belisarius is perfect precisely because he is a nobody. He has no noble kin, no political weight. He depends entirely on the emperor. It is a classic deal with the devil. Justinian gives power, Belisarius pays with absolute loyalty. But there is a nuance. By appointing him, Justinian unknowingly releases a genie from the bottle. He thinks he has obtained an obedient puppet, but he gets a military genius the likes of which the world hasn't seen since Caesar. Look at this guy. Belisarius doesn't try to copy the old tactical textbooks by which the Romans have been losing for half a century. He understands the main thing. The old legion is dead. Infantry is no longer the queen of the fields. It is meat for the Persian cavalry. Belisarius does what in modern warfare would be called creating a private military company. He recruits bucellarii. These aren't just soldiers. This is his personal guard, loyal personally to him, not to abstract Rome. He dresses them in the best armor, pays them in gold from his own pocket, and teaches them a new way of war. Imagine a hybrid. The heavy armor of a Gothic knight and the deadly bow of a Hunnic nomad. Belisarius's bucellarii are universal soldiers of chaos. They can shoot the enemy from a distance and then, grabbing spears, trample them into the mud in close combat. This is a revolution. While the old generals write complaints to the capital, accusing the upstart of violating traditions, Belisarius forges an instrument that is supposed to save the empire, or bury it completely if this instrument turns against its creator. The atmosphere in the east is heating up. The year 529. Belisarius arrives at the fortress of Dara. This is the very edge of the empire, an outpost in the desert, beyond which Persian territory begins. The soldiers meet him with sullen silence. They have already seen many such saviors sent from the capital. Usually they leave in a month, rich and alive, leaving the soldiers to rot in the sands. But this one is different. He doesn't hide in his tent. He eats from the same pot as the privates. He checks the posts personally. He knows the price of every arrow. For the first time in many years, something forgotten appears in the eyes of the legionnaires. Not hope, no. That is too big a word for now. Curiosity. But there is no time for reforms. Spies report terrible news. The Persian armada has begun to move. The earth literally shakes. 50,000 soldiers. The Shahanshah's elite. The Immortals Corps. Warriors whose faces are hidden by golden masks and whose hearts know no pity. They aren't coming just to loot. They are coming to destroy Dara, open the gates to Syria, and bring Rome to its knees. Against them, Belisarius can barely scrape together 25,000. 2 against 1. In an open field, this is a death sentence. Any tactical textbook screams, "Retreat! Lock yourself behind the walls! Pray!" But Belisarius looks at the horizon and does not give the order to retreat. In his head, cold and calculating as a machine, a plan has already matured that seems like madness. He is not going to hide behind the walls. He will go out into the field. He will invite death for a dance. The air over the desert shimmers with heat, but it shivers even more with tension. Rumors of the young madman who decided to challenge the Sassanid Empire fly faster than the wind, seeping through stone, sand, and time, reaching the ears of the Persian commander, who merely grins contemptuously, anticipating an easy slaughter. That self-confident smirk of the Persian general Perozes likely cost the Sassanid Empire more than a lost war. He looks at the Roman positions and doesn't believe his eyes. Instead of cowardly huddling behind the high walls of the fortress of Dara, the Romans have come out into the field, come out to die. Persians is an old wolf. He has seen thousands of battles. He knows the arithmetic of war better than the multiplication table. He has 50,000 soldiers. The Romans have barely 25,000. Double superiority. In any military academy of that time, they would tell you, this is checkmate in one move. Just overwhelm them with mass, crush the flanks, and by sunset, the desert will be fed with Roman bodies. Persians is already mentally dividing the loot and composing a victory report to Ctesiphon. He doesn't see an army, he sees a victim. But let's get closer. Let's descend from the hill where the Persian tent stands and walk through the Roman lines. It doesn't smell of doom here. It smells of sweat and freshly plowed earth. Belisarius has done something that would make a classic Roman centurion's hair stand on end. He ordered the legionnaires to put down their spears and pick up shovels. Imagine this absurdity. In the face of a gigantic cavalry armada capable of sweeping away everything in its path, the Romans are engaged in earthworks. The soldiers grumble. Officers exchange glances. Is this how heroes fight? Shouldn't Rome meet the enemy chest to chest, shield to shield? Are we digging our own graves? Asks one of the recruits, wiping his face with a dirty rag. We are digging graves for their pride, answers a veteran, who has already begun to understand what is happening in their young commander's head. Belisarius turns the field in front of the fortress into a deadly labyrinth. He refuses a continuous front line. It is not a wall, it is a trap. He traces a strange, broken line of trenches in the dust. Deep ditches, interrupted mounds, unexpected angles. From a bird's eye view, it looks like insane geometry. But there is iron logic in this madness. Belisarius knows his infantry is weaker. In a head-on collision, the Persian tanks will roll them out like a thin pancake. Therefore, he needs to ensure there is no head-on collision. He needs to force the enemy to play by his rules. The trenches aren't just an obstacle. They are guiding corridors. Belisarius intentionally leaves wide passages, inviting the Persians to attack exactly where he needs them to. This is psychology cast in the landscape. He tells the Persians, "Look, it's safe here. Come this way." But right there, in those passages, concentrated crossfire awaits the Persian cavalry. This is no longer a battlefield. It is a shooting gallery. Belisarius turns the chaos of hand-to-hand combat into a managed process of destruction. The geometry of death. While the soldiers dig, the young general rides along the formation on his white horse. He doesn't give pompous speeches about the glory of ancestors. He is calm, focused, almost cold. He checks the depth of the ditches, the angles of fire. For him, this isn't an epic battle of good versus evil, but an engineering problem that needs to be solved with minimal costs. The morning of the battle arrives. Summer of the year 530. The sun rises over Mesopotamia, flooding everything with blinding, ruthless light. The air heats up so quickly, it feels like breathing molten lead. The Persian army lines up in battle formation. It is truly a terrifying and beautiful sight. A sea of people and horses, the glitter of armor, a forest of banners. The ground hums under the hooves of tens of thousands of horses. This sound, low and guttural, penetrates the stomach, causing nausea from fear. Opposite them is the Roman line, strange, broken, hiding behind earthen ramparts. Perozes is bewildered. He expected to see a classic phalanx, a dense formation of shields. Instead, he sees some burrows and ditches. He halts the attack. The first day passes in minor skirmishes and nervous waiting. The Persians try to probe the defense, sending light cavalry, but each time they run into a hail of arrows and retreat. Belisarius doesn't take the bait. He keeps his bucellarii in reserve, in the center, behind the infantry. He waits. He knows that the Persians' numerical superiority is their weakness. It is difficult to manage a huge army. It is cramped on this narrow sector of the front. 50,000 people is not only strength, it is also a giant traffic jam if you intelligently restrict their maneuverability. Night falls on the desert, but no one sleeps. The clatter of weapons, the neighing of horses, and prayers in 2 languages are heard. The Romans understand. Tomorrow will be either their triumph or the last day in the history of Eastern Rome. The fear in the trenches is almost tangible. But this is no longer the panic of fugitives. It is the cold determination of cornered beasts. They see that their commander is not going to throw them to the slaughter. Every soldier in this trench knows his maneuver. They are no longer a faceless mass. They are the teeth of a single gear mechanism wound up by Belisarius. On the morning of the second day, Perozes loses patience. He is tired of playing staring contests with a boy. Letters are coming from the capital demanding victory. He decides to end this with one powerful blow. Horns blow. The Persian formation begins to move. It looks like a tide that is impossible to stop. The first wave, archers and light infantry, rolls onto the Roman ditches. The sky darkens from thousands of arrows. The whistling is so loud it blocks out hearing. But the Romans don't run. They take cover behind the parapets they dug yesterday and fire back. And then something happens that Perozes could not have foreseen. His magnificent cavalry, the pride of the East, begins to get bogged down. The ditches break the formation. Horses hitting obstacles bunch up. The attack, which was supposed to be swift as lightning, turns into shoving at a bazaar. Instead of a single fist, the Persians break up into separate groups, forced to squeeze into the passages left by Belisarius. And there, they are already waiting. Belisarius's Hunnic archers, the best marksmen in the world, begin their bloody work. They shoot at point-blank range, shoot at the unprotected flanks of the horses, shoot into the eye slits of helmets. The Roman center, which seemed the weakest point, stands to the death. Belisarius intentionally weakened it to lure the enemy deeper. It is a classic, risky gambit. Expose a piece to a strike to win the position. And the Persians swallow the bait. They see the Roman infantry in the center backing up, and with a victorious roar, they rush forward, thinking they have broken the front. They don't see that the Roman flanks remain in place, creating a deadly sack. Perozes, watching this from the hill, thinks victory is already in his pocket. He makes a fatal mistake. He throws his main reserve into battle, the legendary Immortals. 10,000 elite horsemen, clad in steel from head to toe, rush into the center to finish off the retreating Romans. The earth shudders from the impact. Dust rises to the heavens, hiding the sun. The trap that Belisarius prepared so meticulously is about to snap shut, and the sound of that impact will be heard even in Constantinople. Do you hear that rumble? It grows like the noise of an approaching train in a tunnel. It isn't just the stomp of hooves, it is the sound of arrogance. 10,000 immortals fly forward, and each of them is sure that tonight he will eat dinner on the ruins of Dara, wiping his hands on the silk of Roman standards. They see the backs of retreating Roman infantrymen before them and smell blood. The predator's instinct drowns out the voice of reason. "The enemy is running! Finish them!" This thought pulses in the temples of every Persian horseman. General Perozes on his hill is probably already composing an insulting letter to Justinian, describing how easily his invincible army trampled the Roman puppies. But look closer. The Romans in the center are not running in panic, throwing away weapons. They are retreating in an organized manner, step by step, keeping formation. This is not a flight, it is an invitation. Belisarius, watching the battle, does not tremble with fear. His face is motionless as a mask, but his eyes have narrowed predatorily. He sees what Perozes does not see in the clouds of dust. He sees geometry. The Persian wedge punching through the yielding center goes deeper and deeper into the prepared sack. They are driving themselves into a bottleneck. The trenches on the sides, which the Persians ignored in the heat of the attack, now become prison walls. And then, when the advanced detachments of the Immortals almost reach the Roman ramparts, the trap snaps shut. A sharp trumpet signal cuts through the noise of battle. The Roman infantry, which was just running away, suddenly stops, turns around, and locks shields, turning into an impenetrable wall. The Persian horses crash into this living barrier, but the inertia of the rear ranks pushes the front ones onto the spears. A crush ensues. The elite cavalry, accustomed to the freedom of maneuver, finds itself squeezed into a tight gut. They push, prevent each other from swinging swords. Horses bite and kick their own. At this moment, Belisarius makes his main move. He pulls an invisible string, and the scene changes instantly. From behind the hills on the flanks, like ghosts from the dust, detachments of Hunnic cavalry fly out. This is the hidden reserve that Perozes didn't even suspect. The Huns aren't a regular army. They are a force of nature. They crash into the unprotected flanks of the Persian wedge with the fury of wild beasts. A strike to the flank for cavalry is death. A rider cannot defend himself from the side. His shield faces forward or left, but death arrives from the right. The formation of the Immortals breaks. Imagine the sound of a dry branch breaking, only amplify it thousands of times. It is the crunch of breaking spears, bones, and fates. Those very warriors who a minute ago considered themselves demigods suddenly realize they are mortal. Very mortal. Panic is a virus, and it spreads faster than the plague. When the Immortals begin to scream in terror, the entire rest of the Persian army freezes. Their elite, their hope, their pride turns into a shapeless pile, methodically ground down by Roman swords and Hunnic arrows. Perozes turns pale on his hill. His triumph crumbles into dust right before his eyes. He tries to give orders, send reinforcements, but it is too late. Control of the battle is lost. Chaos consumes the Persian ranks. Belisarius is cold as ice. He doesn't rush into the thick of the fight to chop heads. He conducts an orchestra of death. Right flank, forward! Left flank, hold position! Archers, fire on the center! He sees the battlefield as a chessboard, where the opponent has already made a fatal mistake and is now simply waiting for checkmate. This is no longer a battle of two armies. It is a beating. The Romans, who had endured years of humiliation from the Persians, pour out all their accumulated rage. They aren't striking for the emperor, not for pay. They are striking for their fear that tormented them yesterday, for their fallen comrades, for every inch of land they lost before. The Huns howl, circling around the demoralized Persians, showering them with arrows. The Immortals fall from their saddles, their heavy armor, which was supposed to save them, now dragging them to the ground, preventing them from rising. Golden masks are trampled into mud and blood. The air fills with the sweet, nauseating smell of fresh blood and the contents of ripped open bellies. The sun stands at its zenith, indifferently illuminating this slaughter. Belisarius gives the enemy no respite. He understands. A wounded beast must be finished off, or it will return and bite off your hand. The Roman counterattack turns into a total offensive. Those who were hunters just moments ago are now running, dropping shields, helmets, and honor. The great Persian army, 50,000 men, turns into a herd of terrified sheep. And the shepherd of this herd is a young Roman general who has just rewritten the history of military art before the eyes of an astonished world. The fame of this day will fly to all ends of the earth, but, as we know, fame is a commodity that has a very strange price in Constantinople. It will reach the capital faster than messengers, poisoning the air in the palace even before the ink dries on the victory dispatch. Silence. At first it seems deafening after hours of clashing iron and the screams of the dying. The desert below Dara is no longer yellow, it is crimson. 50,000 people. Try to imagine that mass. It is the population of an entire ancient city turned into statistics in one day. The Sassanid army, that haughty, gold-glittering machine, is not just defeated, it is annihilated. Those who called themselves immortals now lie in heaps in dusty trenches, proving with their silence that immortality is just a nice marketing ploy of Eastern despots. The battlefield resembles a dump of broken dolls, where the wind lazily picks through the silks of banners that no one is left to carry. Belisarius does not gallop across the field with a victory cry. He rides around the positions with the grim calm of a surgeon who has finished a complex, bloody operation. He didn't just win, he humiliated Persia. He broke the spine of their military doctrine using shovels instead of catapults and brains instead of battering rams. It was a triumph of intellect over brute force, a victory that should go into textbooks. The soldiers, the very ones who looked at him with mistrust yesterday, now look at him like a deity descended from heaven. They reach out their hands to him, their throats, hoarse from thirst, chant his name. And in this roar, in this adoration, something far more dangerous for Belisarius is born than Persian swords. A legend is born. Fame is a drug, and the people of Constantinople get hooked on it instantly. News of the victory at Dara flies across straits and mountains, accumulating fantastic details. In the taverns of the capital, they say, Belisarius turned enemies to flight with a single glance, that his horse trampled clouds. The city rejoices. People tired of taxes, corruption, and fear of barbarians have finally received a hero, a real one. Not a puffed-up turkey in a senatorial toga, but a warrior who gave them a reason for pride. The name Belisarius is written on walls, shouted at the Hippodrome. The cheapest and most expensive wine is drunk to him. But let's look inside the place where wine is drunk from goblets adorned with precious stones, but the taste always smacks of bitterness. The Great Palace. What do you think Emperor Justinian feels hearing this roar of the crowd? Joy? Relief? Oh no. You don't know the nature of power well. In Justinian's eyes, when the report of the total defeat of the Persians is read to him, a cold, calculating fear flickers. Understand one simple thing. For a dictator, nothing is more terrifying than a successful general. The history of Rome is a long list of emperors killed by their own commanders whom the soldiers loved too much. Justinian looks at the map and sees not a saved border, but the growing shadow of his servant, which is already beginning to cover the throne. Belisarius did his job too well. If he could destroy the army of Persia with a handful of men, what's to stop him from turning the legions around and coming to Constantinople? Loyalty? Honor? For Justinian, these are empty words used to cover ambitions. He judges people by himself, and he would step over his own mother for power. A paradox that makes one's jaw clench. The empire cannot survive without Belisarius's victories, but the emperor cannot sleep peacefully because of them. It is a toxic trap. Justinian needs the sword, but fears the hand that holds it. Instead of gratitude, a black seed of paranoia sprouts in his soul. He begins to count, not the trophies seized from the Persians, but the number of soldiers ready to die for Belisarius. And he really doesn't like that count. While the blood hasn't yet cooled on the swords in the camp near Dara, and soldiers are dividing Persian gold, nets are already being woven in Constantinople. Victory on the battlefield instantly turns into defeat in the political arena. The hero who saved the East has unwittingly signed his own sentence. He thought he was bringing peace and glory to the capital, but in reality, he is bringing the cause of his future tragedy. The air in the throne room becomes stale. Courtiers' smiles become thinner, glances sharper. Every toast to the winner's health sounds like a veiled threat. Justinian writes a reply letter to Belisarius. It contains many flowery phrases about divine providence and the valor of Roman arms. But between the lines, an icy coldness blows. The emperor summons him to the capital. Not for a triumph, as the naive people think, but to keep him on a short leash, so that this bright light doesn't blind the subjects so much that they stop noticing the emperor himself. Belisarius returns home not as a conqueror, but as a problem that needs solving. He leaves behind the desert where everything was simple and honest. Here is the enemy, here is the sword, here is victory. He rides into a world where a stab in the back is considered a sign of good manners, and a friendly embrace is a way to check if you are wearing chainmail. The general's fame reached Constantinople faster than the messengers, poisoning the air in the palace. And when the hero's foot steps onto the marble of the capital's embankment, he will find himself in a place far more dangerous than a battlefield with 50,000 Persians. Here, in the golden cages of power, poison works surer than steel, and neither shields nor cunning trenches will save you from it. In the corridors of the great palace, the rustle of silk robes is already audible from those preparing to meet the hero with open arms and a dagger in the sleeve. Welcome to Constantinople. Here, in the cool marble halls of the great palace, the air always smells of lavender and treason. If in the desert near Dara death was honest, it flew at you on the tip of a spear, looking straight into your eyes. Here, it smiles in your face, pours more wine, and gently asks about your children's health. Belisarius returned a hero, but in Byzantine politics, hero is a synonym for the word target. He thought the scariest thing was the attack of the immortals. How wrong he was. The scariest thing is the silence that hangs in the meeting hall when you enter. It is the glances that slide over you like fish filleting knives, assessing how much meat can be cut from your reputation. Justinian meets his savior with open arms, but can you feel how tense his fingers are? The emperor is sick with the most terrible disease of rulers, envy. He looks at Belisarius and sees not a loyal servant, but his own distorted reflection. Belisarius is handsome, young, soldiers adore him, the people are ready to kiss the footprints of his horse. And Justinian? Justinian sits in an office, writes laws, and knows that behind his back they call him an upstart. Every enthusiastic shout of the crowd in honor of the general echoes as a migraine in the emperor's head. But Justinian is only half the threat. The second half wears purple and possesses a mind as sharp as a razor and a heart as hard as a diamond. Empress Theodora. A former actress, star of the Hippodrome, a woman who traveled the path from the very bottom of the social ladder to the throne. She knows everything about people. She knows that the crowd carrying you on its hands today will throw stones at you tomorrow, if prompted correctly.
Theodora looks at Belisarius, not with envy, but with the cold pragmatism of a pathologist.
She doesn't need a darling of the people. She needs an attack dog. And a dog shouldn't be too smart or too independent. If a dog is fed too well, it stops biting on command. And Theodora begins her game. A sticky, invisible web begins to be woven around Belisarius. New faces appear in his own home, among the servants. You think it's just help? No, these are the Emperor's ears. Every word said by Belisarius at dinner, every letter, every joke, all of this is recorded and laid on Justinian's table. He said the Persians fought bravely. Denunciation. The general admires the enemies of the empire. He paid salaries to veterans from his trophies. Denunciation. He is buying the army's loyalty to prepare a coup. Can you feel the ring tightening? Belisarius is a tactical genius on the battlefield, but here, in this snake pit, he is helpless as a child. He tries to be honest. He talks about supply problems, about corruption in the rear. Fool. In Byzantium, the truth is high treason. Courtiers whisper in corners, "Look how arrogant he is. He thinks he is more important than the emperor." Envious people who have never held anything heavier than a goblet of wine in their hands now become experts in military strategy. They criticize his decisions, mock his caution, call his victories mere luck. The smear campaign is launched virtuously. It is not a direct strike, it is a slow poison. Rumors crawl through markets and baths. Is it true that Belisarius wants to become Emperor of the West? They say he withheld half the Persian gold. This is a technology of destroying reputation, perfected over centuries. You don't necessarily have to kill a hero physically. It is enough to make him toxic. It is enough to sow doubt. And now, yesterday's friends cross to the other side of the street so as not to say hello. And Justinian watches and waits.
He doesn't protect his general. He allows the predators to bite him, testing his durability. Belisarius feels suffocated. He is used to the expanse of the desert, and here he is locked in a golden cage of etiquette and suspicion. He wants to scream, but he is a soldier. He only knows how to obey. Theodora smiles at him with her mysterious smile from the mosaics, as if saying, "You are ours, Flavius, completely and utterly, and we will break you to build you anew." They don't let him rest. They don't let him enjoy peace, because peace is dangerous for such a man. In peacetime, he might start thinking, and a thinking general is a threat. The empire needs war again, not for victory, but to occupy hands that might reach for the crown. The eastern border is restless again, and this is the perfect excuse to kick Belisarius out of the capital. But now the conditions are changing. He is sent not as a savior with unlimited powers, but as a supervisee who needs to be controlled. They impose advisors on him, read spies. They give him orders that contradict common sense. They push him in the back. The atmosphere heats up to the limit. Belisarius goes to war not with hope, but with a heavy heart, feeling that the real enemy remained behind in the luxurious chambers of the palace. And this enemy has already set the stage for his fall. The next battle will become not a triumph of will, but a tragedy directed in the offices of power, where mistakes are paid for not with ink, but with the blood of legionnaires driven into a trap of others' ambitions. If Dara was a chess match played by a grand master, then what is happening now resembles a dirty fight in an alley where there are no rules, and a knife might come from your own side. Welcome to the banks of the Euphrates, April 19th, 531, Easter Sunday. A day when Christians should pray for resurrection, but the Roman army is preparing for a mass burial. The air here isn't like at Dara. It is heavy, humid from the proximity of the great river, and poisoned with impatience. But not the noble impatience of warriors thirsting for a feat, but the stupid, self-confident itch of looters who are already mentally spending Persian gold. Belisarius doesn't want this battle. Look at him. There is shouting in his tent on the eve of the battle. It is not a council of war. It is a market scandal. His own officers, the very people whose lives he saved with his genius, are now screaming in his face, accusing him of cowardice. Letters arrive from Constantinople soaked in poison. Why do you delay? Or have you conspired with the enemy? And the soldiers? The soldiers, intoxicated by the past victory, have forgotten that luck is a fickle lady. They demand a fight. They don't want to listen about the disadvantageous position, about the fact that there are more Persians, about the fact that fighting with your back to a river is suicide.
Belisarius looks at these faces, distorted by greed, and realizes he is no longer the commander. He is a hostage of his own fame and others' stupidity. Genius is powerless when idiots decide to vote for death, and he yields. Sometimes a commander's courage lies not in giving the order, "Forward," but in not giving it. But here he has no choice. If he refuses, a mutiny will break out right here, and the army will slaughter itself even before the Persians arrive. Belisarius leads the troops into the field. The place is cursed. Kalinicum. On one side, the Euphrates River, wide and indifferent. On the other, the endless steppe from which the Persian horde rolls in. The battle begins not with tactical maneuvers, but with a catastrophe. The right flank of the Romans is held by allies, the Sassanid Arabs. But as soon as the first Persian arrows begin to fall from the sky, the inexplicable happens. Or, conversely, something too predictable for Eastern politics.
The Arabs do not accept battle. They simply turn around and leave. They flow away like water through fingers. Was it betrayal bought with Persian gold, or ordinary cowardice? Historians will argue for centuries, but for the soldiers in the formation, it doesn't matter. What matters is that a giant hole suddenly forms on the flank. The Persian cavalry sees this gift of fate. With a wild howl, they rush into the breach. The Roman formation bursts like rotten fabric. Imagine this moment of horror. You are standing in the center, shield to shield, preparing to repel a blow from the front, and death comes at you from the rear. Panic covers the army instantly. It is a chain reaction. The infantry drop spears. Horsemen turn their horses around, trying to save themselves, but there is nowhere to run. Behind is the river. The Romans find themselves in a stone sack, only instead of stone, there is a living wall of Persian steel pressing them against the water. A crush begins. People trample each other in a mad attempt to get to the crossing, to the boats, to the saving shore. Those pushed into the water drown under the weight of their armor. The Euphrates, murky yellow in the morning, begins to turn a thick brown color. This is not a battle. It is a slaughter. The Roman army, the pride of the East, turns into a squealing mass of flesh that Persian swords methodically slice. Officers tear off their insignia to blend in with the privates. Banners fall into the mud. It seems this is the end. The end of the army, the end of the eastern border, the end of the career, and, likely, the life of Belisarius. But exactly at this moment, when hope dies and only animal fear remains, something happens that separates a great man from a merely lucky one. Belisarius does not run. Although he, as commander-in-chief, has the best horse and a personal boat. He sees the army dying. He sees the backs of those fleeing, and he makes a decision that contradicts the instinct of self-preservation. He dismounts. Do you hear that sound? The thud of Commander's boots on the ground. He lets his horse go. With this gesture, he cuts off his path to retreat. He stands in the first row of the infantry, shoulder to shoulder with simple soldiers, the very ones who yesterday called him a coward. He yells to his bucellarii, his personal guard, to do the same. They create a living island of order in an ocean of chaos. A wall of shields. The last bastion. Belisarius fights like an ordinary legionnaire. His face is covered in soot and other people's blood. He is no longer a strategist moving pieces on a map. He is a gladiator, selling his life at the highest exchange rate. The Persians, confident of victory, roll onto this island time after time and roll back, leaving piles of bodies. They cannot understand. Why aren't these Romans running? Why do they fight with the fury of the doomed?
Belisarius holds the line. His example acts like a slap in the face to a hysteric. The remnants of the infantry, seeing their general here, with them, in the mud, stop panicking and start closing ranks around him. They form a turtle, bristling with spears, pressed with their backs to the river. All day, under the scorching sun, they beat off attacks. The Persians shoot them with bows, ram them with horses, but cannot break this formation. Belisarius personally takes blows on his shield. His voice, hoarse from commands, drowns out the noise of battle. He is buying time. Every minute they stand gives a chance to ferry the wounded to the other bank. He is bargaining with death for every soul. When the sun finally sets, the battlefield plunges into darkness. The Persians, exhausted and shocked by such resistance, retreat to their camp. The battle is lost. That is a fact. Thousands of Romans lie dead or carried away by the current. But the army is not completely destroyed.
Belisarius saved the core of the troops. He led them out of the beast's mouth, paying a terrible price for it. That night, crossing the Black Euphrates on the last boat, Belisarius doesn't feel like a hero. He feels the taste of ash on his lips, the taste of defeat. He knows that back in Constantinople, no one will appreciate his heroism in the rearguard. Justinian doesn't need stories about how a general fought on foot. He needs victory. And there is no victory. There is a rout. And there is a culprit. Messengers with bad news are already galloping to the capital. This time they carry not laurel wreaths, but materials for a criminal case. Belisarius understands. The Persian sword missed, but the pen of a court scribe will strike more accurately. He saved the soldiers, but destroyed himself. The waters of the Euphrates wash the blood from his armor, but they won't be able to wash away the brand of a loser now burned onto his name. He returns to the empire not as a defender, but as a defendant. And the cruelest court awaits him not in heaven, but in the golden hall of the great palace, where mercy is a forgotten currency that went out of circulation centuries ago. You thought the scariest place on earth was a battlefield strewn with corpses. You are mistaken. The scariest place is the quiet, cool courtroom in the great palace, where there are no screams or clashing steel, only the rustling of parchment and whispers that make blood run cold. Belisarius returns to the capital, but this time the gates don't open to solemn fanfares. The crowd doesn't throw flowers under his horse's hooves. No one meets him at all. The hero who was an idol of the empire just yesterday enters the city today like a leper. The space around him empties. Friends who swore loyalty at feasts suddenly discover urgent business in the provinces. This is Byzantine magic. A man becomes invisible while remaining in plain sight. The trial of Belisarius isn't a loud process with lawyers and debates. It is a bureaucratic execution. He is brought into a hall where a special commission sits. Justinian is not present. Emperors don't dirty their hands finishing off the fallen. They entrust this to their attack dogs. Accusations rain down, one more absurd than the other. He is charged not just with the defeat at Callinicum. No, that would be too simple. He is accused of criminal negligence, of conspiring with the Persians, of intentionally letting soldiers die to weaken the army before his allegedly planned coup. Look at him. He stands in the center of the hall, without armor, in a simple tunic. Yesterday's commander of legions, who sent thousands of people to death with a single glance, is now forced to listen to a pomaded eunuch who has never held anything heavier than a fan teach him tactics. This is sophisticated torture. They aren't breaking his body, they are breaking his pride. They want him to make excuses, to humiliate himself, to have the great Belisarius crawl at the feet of non-entities. But Belisarius is silent. He is a soldier. He knows, when the commander is unhappy, excuses don't work. He accepts the blame. "I am guilty, sire." This phrase sounds in the silence of the hall like the strike of a hammer on a coffin lid. He doesn't give up his officers who betrayed him on the battlefield. He doesn't accuse Justinian of sending him to the slaughter without resources. He takes the entire weight of the failure on his shoulders, because that is what the Code of Honor teaches. A code long forgotten in this hall. The sentence is expected and cruel. He is stripped of all rank. The general of the East becomes a nobody. His personal guard, those very bucellarii, is disbanded and transferred to other commanders. This is a blow to the gut. They are taking away his family. Confiscation of property. Gold, estates, trophies, everything goes to the treasury. Belisarius is left a beggar. He waits for the main thing, the order for execution. In those times, defeated generals were often shortened by a head so others wouldn't be tempted. He waits for a knock on the door every day. He doesn't sleep, listening to steps in the corridor. It is a slow dying. The man who looked death in the eye in the desert is now afraid of his own shadow. And then she steps onto the stage. Theodora. The Empress watches this spectacle from behind heavy curtains. She sees Justinian hesitating. The Emperor is angry. He wants blood. He wants to grind Belisarius into dust. But Theodora is smarter. She understands one cynical truth. A dead hero is useless. A dead hero can become a martyr. But a broken, humiliated hero, stripped of everything, that is the perfect tool. She stays the executioner's hand, not out of pity. Forget that word. It is not in Theodora's dictionary. It is cold calculation. She convinces her husband, let him live.
Let him see how merciful we are. He will owe us every breath.
Life is granted to Belisarius as a handout, like scraps from the royal table. His freedom is returned, but it is the freedom of a dog on a long chain. He is no longer an independent figure. He is property of the crown. Imagine this scene. Belisarius comes to thank the Empress. He, a proud warrior, bows his head before a woman who came from the dregs of the circus. She looks down at him with an icy half-smile and says words that cut sharper than a knife. You are alive not because you are right, but because I decided so. Remember that. At that moment, something inside him dies completely. That daring, talented youth who invented the trenches at Dara disappears. A servant remains. An ideal executor. A man without ambitions. Belisarius walks out of the palace. He is alive. The sun still shines, the Bosphorus still sparkles. But the world around has changed. Now he knows his true price to the empire.
He is an expendable asset. His genius is needed only when the throne begins to shake.
But while everything is calm, he is a threat that needs to be kept in the mud. He walks through the streets of Constantinople, and people look away. No one wants to greet a disgraced general. He returns to his empty house, sits in a chair, and stares at the wall. He waits. He knows this peace is deceptive. The empire is rotting from the inside. While Justinian and Theodora reveled in power, humiliating their best servants, hatred accumulated in the dark alleys of the capital. Taxes strangle craftsmen. Corruption eats away at the courts. At the Hippodrome, the heart of public life, two factions of fans, the Venitoi and Prasinoi, the blues and greens, usually ready to tear each other's throats out, suddenly start exchanging glances. They have a common enemy. Not Persians, not barbarians, but those sitting in the imperial box. The air in Constantinople becomes dense, as if before a storm. Belisarius, sitting in his disgrace, feels this electric tension. He understands. His sword will be needed again soon. Not to protect borders, but for something far more terrible. Soon, the cobblestones of the great city will be painted red, and this color won't be from festive ribbons, but from blood spilled by those who have nothing to lose. The silence ends. The storm begins, the name of which is Nika. January 13th, 532. Remember that date. This is the day when Constantinople, the center of civilization, the eye of the universe, decided to gouge out its own eyes. If you think you've seen soccer hooligans, you know nothing about Byzantium. Imagine the Hippodrome, a gigantic stone bowl holding 100,000 people. It isn't a stadium, it is a parliament, a stock exchange, and a battlefield all rolled into one. Here, the fates of ministers are decided, wars are declared, and here the people blow off steam. Usually the stands are divided by colors. Venetoi, the blues, the party of aristocrats and the orthodox. Prasinoi, the greens, the party of merchants and monophysites. They hate each other as only neighbors can. Massacres between them are common, like rain in November. But today the unthinkable happens. Look at the stands. Borders are erased. Blues and greens sit mixed together. Tension hangs in the air, bursting blood vessels in eyes. The reason is simple. Justinian has fed everyone up. His tax collector, John the Cappadocian, robbed the rich and sent the poor begging. His lawyer, Tribonian, sells laws to the highest bidder. The city is suffocating. And when the city prefect tries to execute the instigators of previous riots, the gallows breaks. Two convicts, one blue, the other green, fall alive. Monks hide them in a church. The crowd demands a pardon. Justinian is silent. And this silence becomes the spark that blows up the powder keg. At first, it is just a whisper. The 22nd chariot race. Instead of shouting the names of favorite charioteers, people begin to chant one word. Nika! Win. Nika! The cry used to encourage racers is now addressed not to them. It is a war cry. A war of the people against their emperor. 100,000 throats roar in unison. This sound is scarier than an earthquake. It spills out of the Hippodrome bowl and floods the streets. Nika! 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 The city goes mad. The crowd, this many-headed hydra, no longer fears the guards. They storm the Praetorium prison, releasing all prisoners. Murderers, thieves, politicals, all are now brothers in arms. Someone sets fire to a building. Fire in a wooden city is a death sentence. The wind from the Bosphorus fans the flames. Constantinople begins to burn. Imagine this apocalypse. The greatest city in the world turns into a torch. Smoke blocks out the sun. The baths of Zeuxippus burn. The Senate burns. The porticos where philosophers argued about the nature of the Trinity just yesterday burn. And the most terrible thing, The Hagia Sophia burns. That very old temple, the symbol of divine protection. The roof collapses with a crash resembling the groan of a dying giant. For a Byzantine, this is a sign. God has turned away from Justinian. God has left this city. And what about the palace? Panic, bordering on insanity, reigns there. Justinian, this great reformer, has locked himself in his chambers and is trembling. He tries to bargain. He fires the hated ministers, John and Tribonian. He throws their careers to be eaten by the crowd like meat to hungry dogs. But the dogs have already tasted blood. They don't need handouts. They need the emperor himself. The crowd besieges the palace gates. The guard is demoralized. Soldiers who should defend the throne lower their shields.
They are also part of the people. Their families are starving too. Anarchy on the streets. Women throw roof tiles onto the heads of mercenary soldiers. Priests try to stop the pogroms with icons, but they are knocked off their feet. In this chaos, a new power is born. The crowd finds the nephew of the old emperor, Hypatius. He doesn't want power. He hides under a bed, begging to be left alone. But who listens to a victim? They drag him out, drag him to the Forum of Constantine. They put a golden chain on him instead of a diadem. What irony! A slave chain as a symbol of power, and proclaim him emperor. Hypatius, Augustus, Justinian to the Tiber! Justinian hears these shouts through the thick walls of the palace. He is broken. For 5 years he built plans for world domination, and now his world has shrunk to the size of a suitcase with gold. He gives an order that puts a cross on his honor. Prepare the ship. In the secret harbor of Bucolion, at the foot of the palace, the treasury is being loaded. The empress, eunuchs, loyal servants, everyone is preparing to run. Run to Heraclea, into exile, anywhere, just to get away from this roaring flame and hatred. Belisarius is here, in the palace. He sees this shame. He sees the emperor with shifting eyes, shaking hands, and a voice cracking into a falsetto. This is the end. The empire that stood for 1,000 years collapses in 3 days. Great Rome ends not under the blows of barbarians, but under its own weight, devoured by its own children. The air in the throne room smells of burning and fear. The doors are barricaded, but the blows of battering rams are already audible. It seems there is no way out. Ships are the only hope for life. A miserable, shameful life, but life. Justinian is already mentally trying on the role of an exile, cursing an ungrateful people. No one in this hall, choking on smoke, knows yet that in a few minutes, history will take a sharp turn. A turn that will cost the lives of 30,000 people. But for now, the Emperor of Rome checks if the bags of gold are tied securely and looks with horror at the sea, which seems to him the only friend in this blazing hell. The city he swore to protect has turned into his personal underworld, and the devil is already knocking at the front doors. In the port of Bucolion, the creaking of ropes and the splashing of water against the sides of imperial galleys are heard. The wind from the Sea of Marmara cools the sweaty foreheads of ministers who have already mentally said goodbye to power and are now thinking only about how to save their heads and wallets. The council in the throne room resembles a wake for a living corpse. Justinian, ruler of East and West, sits hunched over like an old man upon whom the sky has collapsed. He no longer talks about laws and reforms. He asks how much gold can be loaded onto one ship without risking sinking it. The generals, the very ones who bragged about their bravery yesterday, now shamefully avert their eyes, studying the patterns on the floor. Fear is the most democratic ruler. It equalizes the emperor with the lowest slave. The decision is made. Run. Leave the city to be torn apart by the mob, save themselves in the provinces, wait out the storm. The logic of cowards is always flawless.
And at this moment, when the history of Byzantium was ready to take a shameful turn and end in flight, a woman's voice cuts through the silence. It isn't loud, but there is so much steel in it that the men flinch as if from a whip crack. Theodora stands up. Look at her. A small, fragile woman in heavy clothes embroidered with pearls. The daughter of a bear-keeper, an actress, a harlot who rose from the very dirt to the top of the world.
She knows the price of power better than all these high-born aristocrats put together, because she gnawed it out with her teeth. She looks at her husband with contempt that even etiquette cannot hide. A silence hangs in the hall, thick and viscous as tar. Theodora doesn't ask for permission to speak. She takes it by right of the strong. Even if safety lay only in flight, I would not choose to flee. Her words fall into the void of the hall like stones. She speaks calmly, without hysteria, with the cold clarity of an executioner reading a sentence. Those who have come into the world cannot avoid death, but for one who has reigned, it is unbearable to be a fugitive. She turns to Justinian, and in her eyes he sees not love, but an ultimatum. Save yourself, sire. You have much money. The sea is near. The ships are ready. But see if, after you are saved, life does not seem more terrible to you than death. And then she utters the phrase that will become the epitaph of this entire era. A razor phrase, cutting the past from the future. Royal purple makes the best shroud. Purple, the color of the imperial mantle, is the color of clotted blood. She chooses death in purple, not life in the rags of an exile. She would rather die an empress here, now, under the knives of the crowd, than live out her days as a former ruler in a dusty province. The effect of her words is like a lightning bolt. The men in the hall, these stern warriors and cunning politicians, suddenly feel like little naughty schoolboys. Shame burns their faces. The woman they despised for her low origin turned out to be the only man in the room. Justinian straightens up. Panic disappears from his eyes, replaced by the angry, desperate determination of a cornered beast. If she is ready to die, then he has no right to run. But to stay, one needs not just courage. One needs strength. One needs a sword. The gazes of everyone present slowly turn in one direction, to a dark corner of the hall where the disgraced general stands. Belisarius. All this time he was silent. He was a spectator at this feast of cowardice. But now he is the main actor again. Justinian looks at him with hope and hatred simultaneously. He understands. His life, his throne, Theodora's life, everything now depends on the man he humiliated and trampled for the last few months. What irony of fate! The tyrant begs his victim for salvation. Belisarius steps out of the shadows. His sword is returned to him. The very sword that was taken away during his arrest. But this time, the hilt chills his palm differently. Along with the weapon, he receives an order. And it is not an order for battle with Persians or barbarians. He doesn't need to protect borders. He needs to protect power from the people. Restore order, says Justinian. But behind this euphemism hides a terrible truth. Kill them all. This is the moment of truth for Belisarius, a moment of terrible moral choice. Before him is not an enemy army. Before him are the residents of his city. Craftsmen, merchants, fathers of families, the very people who just recently shouted his name, greeting him after the victory at Dara. They rose against injustice, against hunger, against tyranny. And now he, the people's hero, must become their executioner. What is happening in his soul? Historians are silent, but we can imagine.
the struggle between conscience and oath. If he refuses, he will keep his hands clean, but the empire will fall. Chaos will consume everything. Barbarians will come to the ashes. For a man of his makeup, for a Roman soldier to the marrow of his bones, chaos is scarier than tyranny. Order, even the bloodiest kind, is better than anarchy. He is an instrument of the state. A sword doesn't ask questions. A sword chops. Theodora looks at him with an unblinking gaze. She knows what he will choose. She bought his life with her mercy back then, after the trial, precisely for this day. It was an investment, and now the time has come to collect dividends in blood. Belisarius nods, briefly, dryly. In that nod is the death of 30,000 people. He doesn't make pompous speeches about duty. He simply takes a step toward the door. Going with him is Mundus, another general, a loyal dog of the regime, ready to tear throats. They develop a plan not for rescue, but for a purge. The plan is simple and cruel, like a blow with a club. The Hippodrome is packed with people. They are drunk on freedom. They are proclaiming a new emperor. They think they have won. They are locked in a stone bowl from which there are few exits. It is the perfect trap. Belisarius puts on his helmet, lowers the visor, hiding his eyes. From this moment, the man named Flavius Belisarius exists no more.
There is a faceless killing machine.
He exits the palace into the inner courtyard, where the remnants of loyal troops are assembling. Veterans, mercenaries, Goths, people for whom the residents of Constantinople are strangers. They check weapons. The clang of steel in the pre-dawn silence sounds like a funeral bell. Belisarius mounts his horse. He doesn't look at the Hagia Sophia, whose dome has collapsed as if God closed his eyes so as not to see what is about to happen. He looks toward the Hippodrome, from where the roar of the crowd celebrating its imaginary victory can be heard. They scream, "Nika!" not knowing that the goddess of victory has already betrayed them, preferring the one who is ready to pay the highest price for her, the price of humanity. The detachment moves out. Horseshoes click on stones, tapping out the countdown to the most terrible massacre in the history of Byzantium. The palace doors swing open, releasing demons outside. Purple truly is the best shroud. But today, not the Empress, but the entire city will be wrapped in it. The Hippodrome hums like a disturbed hive. 100,000 people in the stands are intoxicated by their own boldness. They proclaimed a new emperor. The poor, trembling Hypatius put a gold chain on him and seated him in the kathisma, the imperial box. They think this is the finale, that the tyrant Justinian is already running to the ships, tail between his legs, and tomorrow a new, just era will begin. Naive. They don't understand that the Hippodrome is a perfect architectural trap. A stone bowl with high walls and only a few exits. They locked themselves in, and the key to this dungeon is now in the hands of a man who has forgotten the word mercy. Belisarius approaches the gates. He doesn't hurry. There is a terrible, mechanical precision in his movements. He knows the layout of the Hippodrome better than his own bedroom. He sends his colleague, General Mundus, to the Gate of the Dead. A symbolic name, isn't it? To cut off the path to retreat. He himself, with his veterans clad in heavy armor, approaches the main entrance. The soldiers are silent. They know what they have to do. This is not a battle with Persians where there is honor and martial valor. This is sanitation. The doors swing open. The crowd goes quiet for a moment. They see the shine of armor, and for a second, just for a split second, they think the guard has come to swear allegiance to the new emperor. But then they see the soldiers' eyes. There is no oath in them, only emptiness. Belisarius draws his sword. This is the signal. The first row of spectators falls, mown down like grass. The scream of horror that erupts from the throats of tens of thousands of people is so strong, it seems capable of cracking the sky. But the sky is silent. God on this day seems to have decided not to look at Constantinople. Methodical work begins.
Belisarius doesn't chase after every rioter. He forms his men into a phalanx and begins to move. A wall of shields and swords simply goes forward, grinding everything living in its path. The crowd rushes back in panic, but there are locked gates and Mundus's detachments. People have nowhere to run. They begin to crush each other. In the tightness of the Hippodrome, the crush kills faster than steel. People climb over heads, fall from high stands, breaking bones. It turns into a mess. The air becomes pink from the bloody mist. Have you ever heard what 30,000 people screaming simultaneously sounds like? This sound is impossible to describe. It penetrates the walls of the palace where Justinian and Theodora sit in tense silence. They hear their people dying. They hear cries of rage turn into howls of pain, and then pleas for mercy. But there will be no stop order. Belisarius is a soldier. He was given a task: restore order. And he understands order literally. No people, no problems. He walks knee-deep in the blood of his fellow citizens, the very ones whose children perhaps played with his children. But right now, for him, they aren't people. They are biomass threatening the state. There is no place for heroism here. What heroism can we talk about when professional killers butcher unarmed craftsmen and merchants? This is a slaughter. Industrial extermination. Belisarius sees faces distorted by fear, sees outstretched hands, but his hand doesn't tremble. He switches off the human inside himself. Only the function remains. The sword rises and falls. Strike, step, strike, step. The rhythm of death. Hours pass in this nightmare. Gradually, the screams subside. They are replaced by moans, and then silence sets in. A ringing, dead silence that is scarier than any scream. 30,000 corpses. Try to comprehend this number.
This is the population of a whole city, slaughtered in one day, on a square of a few hundred meters. The Hippodrome is piled with bodies. The blood doesn't have time to soak into the sand. It stands in puddles, flows down the steps, forming streams. Belisarius stops. He takes off his helmet. It is hard for him to breathe. The air is saturated with the smell of iron and death. He looks at his handiwork and realizes a terrible thing. The great commander, the conqueror of Persians, the savior of Rome, died here, on these stands. He exists no more. Only the executioner remains. Justinian's attack dog, who proved his loyalty in the most gruesome way possible. Soldiers drag the hapless Emperor Hypatius from under a pile of bodies. He is alive. He is crying. He is begging. They drag him to the palace, to Justinian's feet. There, on the marble floor, this short and ridiculous revolution will end. But Belisarius is indifferent to this now. He wipes his sword with a piece of someone's cloak. The metal is clean again and shines in the sun. But he knows this dirt can never be washed off. He saved the throne. He saved the empire. But he killed the soul of Rome. Justinian kept power. Theodora won. The next day, the sun will rise over the Bosphorus just the same. Markets will open, though there will be noticeably fewer buyers. Ships will go out to sea. Life will continue. but it will be a different life. A life in fear. Now every resident of Constantinople, passing by Belisarius, will lower their eyes not out of reverence, but out of animal terror. They will see in him not a hero, but a monster that can come for them at any moment. Belisarius walks out of the Hippodrome. He goes to the palace to report the completion of the mission. He walks with the gait of a tired man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He won. But looking at his hunched back, you understand. This is a defeat.
An absolute, crushing moral defeat. The empire devoured its best son, turning him into an instrument of terror. The story of Belisarius and Justinian is a lesson for all times. Empires don't need heroes, they need accomplices. And the most talented of them paid the highest price. He gave up his honor so a tyrant could sleep peacefully. He gave Justinian the world, and in return received only the right to die not today, but sometime later in oblivion and loneliness, knowing that his fame forever drowned in the blood of 30,000 innocents in the arena of the capital's circus.